I want to welcome you all to Live from my drum room, and it's a pleasure to see you all today. And I'm very excited to welcome my guest, a legend in the music industry and beyond, and actually in the sports industry as well, the great David Fishof.
Wow, thank you. I didn't need that kind of build up, but
Yes, you did. Great to see you, my friend. Thank you for being here today.
thank you, John. I tell you, got emotional thinking you were going to do this podcast because drummers, my brother was a drummer. So I always wanted to be a drummer. I couldn't do the four. I couldn't put my hands and my feet together. But man, my brother got the chicks being the drummer. He was 6 years older than me. And everybody talks about, oh, I started to play guitar because I wanted to be, but not the drummers. They got the best looking chicks. Let's face it, Tommy Lee, and
Yeah.
being a drummer, I started my career just watching my brother in high school. And so it resonated with me, the drummers. And I'll never forget 3 years after I'm representing Ringo Starr, and he called me to dinner, and we had dinner in England, and he said to me, "Why did you call me?" And I said, "You know why? Just because he said, you never talk the Beatles with me. You always tell me what you're doing with me and creating the All-Starr band with him." And I said, "I got to be honest with you. My brother, he loved you, and you were the reason that he plays drums."
Yeah.
And I bet you've done so many interviews, but I would say the majority of rock and roll drummers today who saw Ringo Starr on the Ed Sullivan, it's the number one answer: why I play drums.
Absolutely, David. You hit the nail on the head without a doubt. I mean, so many, and even guys that we know that you might not think that. I have a lot of great friends that are renowned jazz drummers that
Right.
saw the Beatles in 1964, and it just changed their whole path.
Yeah, yeah.
Seeing Ringo.
And another great drummer that I had the honor to sit, he used to work in nightclubs, Buddy Rich. And I remember
Yes.
being stuck and not stuck. I was sitting in a nightclub like right next to him. It was like a small club in New York. Like if you go to those jazz rooms, and I remember sitting like, I don't know, 3 feet from Buddy Rich, 4 feet, and just watching those hands move. And so there's something about a drummer that, well, like Vinny Appice says in my film Rock Camp, he says, you can wear whatever you want to wear. No one gives a crap. You can wear shorts.
Right.
And I just
oh man.
And I got so excited to talk to you. I know I should shut up, but
no, this is you. Come on.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, and so many of them. First of all, I had the honor to work with Ringo. 15 years, put that all-star band together, and this year I got to spend time with Steve Gadd when I was doing these master classes, and I have to tell Steve that when I was putting the all-star band together, Ringo, he said, we would talk about the first band. We talk about, who's going to be in the band. And the first guy he asked me, he says, see if Steve Gadd is available, and see if Jim Keltner is available. And those were his go-to. And, and I felt, wow, what an honor to Steve. I just wanted you to know that. And, he was touring, but Jim Keltner, and I never heard of these guys. I didn't realize that they were really how incredible drummer they are. And then I met Jim Keltner on the tour, and he's a very famous scene in my movie, but it's where Ringo putting this all-star band together, and Levon, Helm, and Joe Walsh have a fight, as you probably saw, and Jim Keltner has filmed it. He's the one who filmed the whole thing.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
That's
genius.
Keltner. Yeah, Keltner.
Oh my God.
And boy, to meet Jim Keltner is, and to realize what a giant he was, but he's such a, and most drummers really are modest. I have to say nothing's worse than the lead singer, Ringo is so big. The guitar player is like, but the drummer, he's used to carrying his drums, and
right.
And my brother kept saying, why didn't my parents let me teach me violin?
It humbles us. You're right. Having to schlep all that gear, it really does. It
really humbles
man.
You. And
it's so great. I don't want to give away I got to tell everybody what David's talking about is this amazing documentary on the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, and it's called Rock Camp. I think, David, is that correct?
Rock Camp. It's on Amazon Prime for free. It's on YouTube.
Yep.
And
It's great. And David just made me aware the other day, and I'm just about done watching it, but it's incredible. And there's a scene, and I don't think we're going to give away anything by
no, they're gonna
the
watch it.
scene you're
Most
talking
people
about.
watch it three,
Yeah.
4 times because there's so many rock stars in it.
Yeah, it's an hour and a half of nonstop rock stars with testimonials and great stories. And there's a scene with a fake fight with Joe Walsh and Levon Helm, the two most unassuming guys that you'd ever think would get in a fight.
Right.
And they basically punk David. It's just it was Ringo's idea to punk David, and you come running in, the concerned promoter, manager. Oh my God, what's going to happen to the tour?
Well,
And
here's the story.
it's
I'll set it up.
hilarious.
I'm sitting having dinner backstage at the Garden State Arts Center, and and I was trying to convince the president of Radio City to book the All-Star band because Ringo said, "Oh, I want to play at Radio City," you know. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, Nils Lofgren walks by my table, and he says, "You know, Fishof, I'm out of here." Now, people didn't believe that I could put this All-Star band together. You can do it for one night for a benefit, you know,
Right.
live aid, you can put people together, but to go on tour with all these different band leaders,
Man.
and you know, it's going to be horrendous. And Joe Walsh described it best. He said, we're a democratic band. Whatever Ringo tells us, we do."
Yes.
And so the band turned out to be Levon Helm on drums and Jim Keltner on drums with Ringo. The three drummers. And
Yeah.
and so then all of a sudden Clarence Clemens walks by and he says, "Fishof, I'm out of here too." The late Clarence. I said, "What's going on?" He says, "We can't get along. You know, there's a big fight going on. Joe Walsh and Levon Helm are fighting. You better go in there." And I can't. These guys are 10 years older than me. They're all fighting. And I said, "Let me go find Ringo." He was hiding. I couldn't find him. So the security guard says, "You better go in there. This thing's going to blow up." And all I could see was my house going down the river. I was going to mortgage my house to do that.
I know.
I mortgaged my house.
You bet the farm on it.
I
Yeah.
bet the farm. Ringo Starr, and also I'm going to bet the farm on this one. And what happened is I walk in there and Levon's got a glass bottle and blood. Joe Walsh has a knife and blood, and they're fighting. And then you got to watch the movie. But
Oh my God. Yeah.
they punked me.
Oh, they punked you good. And I saw that tour, David, and Ringo, forgive me, Greg Bissonette, who's been his drummer now since 2006 or 8, one of my best friends. Forgive me, Greg. That 1989 tour was off the chain. Yeah. I mean, as you said,
Nothing like it.
Ringo, Jim Keltner, Levon Helm, Clarence Clemens, Joe Walsh, Billy Preston too, I think, right?
Dr.
Was he on
John, Billy Preston.
Dr. John, yeah.
Yeah, it was
Nils Lofgren, yeah.
And every night those guys killed it. And then once I saw how much fun that everyone had on tour, and Ringo said no managers, no agents. The only one on the plane is the band, David, my lawyer, and my wife would come occasionally. And it was so great because they all got so friendly. And I remember Clarence teaching me how to play cards, and everyone got so close. And I just said, if I could give this opportunity to a fan to do this, and to be around these people, because it was incredible. And I was getting calls every day. What's this guy like? Are they getting along? This thing can't work. There were so many doubters out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember the head of CAA. Oh, this thing's not going to work. I mean, everyone doubted me that this thing could work, and it was amazing.
And you created the template for what now Ringo, his
32
whole
years, 15 years we did it, and it was incredible. And I kept changing the band. I kept moving it around. And I mean, to me, Sheila E. I mean, here Sheila E's playing with Ringo. I mean, to put those two,
that was amazing,
different backgrounds. And then I remember watching on that Sheila E. tour, I remember watching every night that Emerson, Lake and Palmer song, because we had Greg Lake on the tour.
Yes.
And to see Sheila playing with that silhouette, there was like a white lighting silhouette. It was just, I'd run out to always backstage just to see her. She was amazing too.
She was. She is something. And I want to back up a minute even before the Ringo tour, because I first became aware of who you are in 1986, the Monkees 20th anniversary reunion tour, which was, I was living in LA. I saw the show in Costa Mesa, and then 2 or 3 nights later at the Greek when Mike Nesmith joined the tour.
You were there that night?
I was there that night. Eddie
How'd you get
Zine, the
tickets?
late
How'd you get tickets?
Eddie's rest his soul, Eddie Zine, the late great Eddie
Yes,
Zine.
Eddie Zine.
He was a friend of mine, and I know he got me tickets at the last minute. He said I'm going to try. It was a Sunday. I remember this. He called me at home and he said, "Okay, I got you two." And I'm like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" And he said, "You got to keep this under your hat, no pun intended. Mike Nesmith is going to probably come out and do a tune."
History.
And yeah, it was unbelievable. And that whole tour, David. I just got to tell you, man, that was what a package you put together with Gary Puckett, the Grassroots, Herman's Hermits, the Monkees as the headliner. It was one of the best shows.
Oh, that was a great night. And that was an
Yeah.
amazing tour. And I put that band together. So I signed these three monkeys and three monkeys, three guys. They didn't own the name. I didn't realize after I signed it, I had to buy the name from Columbia Pictures. So it was three guys and I had to buy the name. They didn't own the name. They were just a TV show.
Of
And
course,
nobody
yeah.
didn't know the name. And they all weren't talking to each other. And so I had to put the band together. And I remember hiring Eddie Zine, and I put horns in. They never had horns. The Monkees didn't have horns,
Right.
but I love horns. I said, you know what? I'm going to find four horny guys from Juilliard Music. I remember putting an ad in the Village Voice. I'm looking for four horn players, and I'll give you $250 a week, and come on tour with the Monkees. And all these guys they're all, by the way, they're all successful. One guy became a doctor. One guy's still working, and they're all working. But they were on that tour, and then I put the whole band together. And then the Monkees met them for the first time up at the Concord Hotel, and that became the band. And
Yeah.
that was an exciting night, an exciting tour.
Great tour. Yeah.
And then you didn't know, but before you were living in Boston, we sold out Foxborough Stadium.
I think, yeah, I that tour was like one of the highest grossing tours of that summer, right? I think it was.
You'll see a little bit in the movie, yeah. And unbeknownst to me, what really happened was my office was on 1775 Broadway on the 7th floor and on the 8th floor and 9th floor was this new fledgling network called MTV. And I got a call from the late Jim Bestman. I don't know if you know him. He wrote for Billboard, and he says, "David, I know you're doing your regular Happy Together tour, and you're going to use the Monkees." He says, "But did you know that MTV is going to air 24 hours of Monkees?" And I said, "No." I said, so I run upstairs to Bob Pittman's office, who was the head of MTV at the time, and he now runs iHeartRadio. And I said, "Mr. Pittman, hi, I'm David Fishof, and we see each other in the elevator." "Oh yeah, you're the sports agent. Those Giants suck, And back then, I represented Phil Simms, and the Giants were terrible in '84 and '85, and so these guys, they would bet the games and they would lose, and I'd walk around New York like I'm a loser, like, "Oh, you're Simms," And
they blame you, yeah.
blame me, sure, yeah. I lost my money because of you, and so what happened was that he says, "Sit down, kid." He said, "You're doing the Monkees?" He says, "I'll make a deal with you. I'll promote the Monkees, your tour, on this new fledgling network MTV of mine, and you promote my MTV on all your ads." And I said, "Sure." And it was a marriage made in heaven. And I went on sale, and I'll never forget. I was doing 3,000 people on these Happy Together tours. I sold 26,000 in Chicago one night. I sold 2 nights out in Detroit, 15,000 each, custom made. I mean, it was the hardest ticket. And what happened was all these little girls would come home and 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning for buying tickets. And the mothers would yell, "Where were you all night?" "Mommy, I was buying Monkey tickets, this new band on MTV." And the mother says, "I love the Monkees. They're a 20-year-old band. I want to go." And the first 20 rows were little girls screaming and their mothers. And it was you remember the screams. I mean, you don't see that today. You might see that at a Backstreet Boys concert, but nothing like the Monkees, or like the Beatles had those screams, and it was amazing.
I remember John Stamos and a bunch of the cast members from General Hospital were in the row behind me at the Greek.
Really?
It was the place to be. Like it was like, what it's like out there anyway. There's always celebrities, but it's funny you should say. A quick funny story. So I'm living in LA. I'm living in the Valley, and my next door neighbor was this woman who had 2 teenage daughters, and they were massive Monkees fans. And I think they might have been to maybe the Costa Mesa show or one of the LA area shows. And they knew that I worked at that time I was working for Simmons Drums in Los Angeles. So they knew that I worked in the music industry. and I'd become friends with Eddie. And so the tour had ended, and Eddie was coming back out to LA for something. And I said, listen, you can stay with me if you want, forget paying for a hotel and you come stay at, crash at my house. So I knocked on their door. Eddie stayed for a couple of days, and I knocked on the door and I said, this is Eddie Zine. He's the drummer for the Monkees. And they couldn't believe it. They couldn't hold it together. They were like, oh my God. They were like, they were meeting Mickey.
Right.
It was a great feeling for me to just say, this is,
and you know what Eddie Zine did? The footage in the film, it's from Eddie. And I thank him at the end. Yeah, it's his footage. Eddie filmed the entire, I have all the DVDs. He filmed the entire tour from every bus ride, concerts, the fans. He sent it to me when I was doing the film. I said, Eddie, can you send me? And he shared with me again, because I lost my first set. He kept every record of that, and Mickey got the tour. People. It was really an incredible experience, and it really propelled me that I was able to do camp later, and I'm really thankful.
I'll just one more quick story. That first time that I saw them in Costa Mesa, I wasn't expecting anything, and I actually brought this replacement. You might remember Mickey would stand up front and play these two electronic pads during.
Oh yeah.
With a cymbal.
I remember. Hold on.
You remember that? And
yes.
And he would break them quite often because they were prone to breaking. So Eddie said to me, "Hey, could you grab a couple of replacement pads for Mickey when you come to the show tonight?" So I said, "Sure, of course." And I come down, and I wasn't expecting anything. He said, "You want to meet Mickey?" And I went, "Oh my God, he was my first drum hero as a kid." Every kid my age in 1966 when that show was on TV, I wanted to be Micky Dolenz. So Mickey comes out. He was so nice. And he leans into me, and I'm introduced as John, that works for Simmons Drums. And Mickey says, "Boy, he said something like, sorry, I'm breaking these things." He said, "You sure don't make them like they used to." And it just cracked me up. That stayed with me, almost 40 years later.
Well, I remember when he got those drums, the Simmons drums up there, he had never played them before.
Right.
He never played them, and that was I don't know. I guess you guys recommended that he plays them. And I remember the sound, and he was beating the crap out of them. And that was the first time, because he had to play drums because everybody knew him as a drummer, but he couldn't play the whole set, and he wanted to be in the front because I don't think people realize, but the lead singer of the Monkees is Micky Dolenz.
Oh yeah, I mean, what a voice! I mean, we could go on about Mickey all day because I think he's one of the greatest singers in rock and roll.
Okay, so the biggest question I got in every podcast, every interview, here's a film. Number one question is about the Monkees. Why isn't this band in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? They sold more records. They control the industry. Every 10 years, they control the industry for the time the show's on, and their songs. And I don't know. I feel
timeless.
Yeah, not in there.
Well, we probably both know the answer to that. That it's beyond the things that you just said, the criteria that make up something like that. But
they are rock and roll. I tell you a cute story. My kids, I have a 16 and a 17-year-old, and I took them on the Monkees Beach Boy tour because on the cruise. I decided to take them on a cruise because I wanted them to see Micky Dolenz. I wanted to see the Monkees. I wanted them to see the Beach Boys because my first rock concert was the Beach Boys, and so it was the Beach Boys Chicago tour, and I wanted these kids to see it. And they saw Mickey, and I tell you, I was blown away by the current drummer of the the current drummer of the Beach Boys, from the Cowsills.
Oh yes, John Cowsill.
Wow, he blew me away because I just thought that was a kiddie band, and I just had the honor to have his wife at my Vicki Peterson from the Bengals. She came to my all women's camp, and so, no.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. I didn't realize you did an all women's camp. I knew, he's married to Vicki and from the Bengals. I had
Samantha Maloney on drums. And then I had Lizzie Hale from Hailstorm and Winona. And last year I did it with Melissa Etheridge, and I did it with Nancy Wilson.
Fantastic.
So all women's camp. It's great. They don't have to worry about some guy coming over them jamming a lick and trying to show off, and they feel safe and they get the talent. That was amazing too. There and women drummers, we have a lot of them.
So yeah, so that's a great segue, David, to like fast forward to 1997, and you have this idea for a rock and roll fantasy camp. And I remember now, I could be wrong about my recollection of when we met, but I feel like you would come to the NAMM show every year, and I remember you came one year and introduced yourself, you with maybe with your daughter or with someone who
Right.
was in the
My son's a
organization.
drummer too. He loves to drum.
Yeah. And someone said David Fishof is out front and he'd like to talk with you. And I went, and you didn't know who I was. I think I was the guy in charge at Zildjian, so you wanted to meet me. And I'm like, the David Fishof? Yeah. So we
A
met and
legend
you
in my
told
own
me,
mind.
no, really, I knew who you were for sure. At that point, you were, if you work in the music industry, you got to know who you are. And you told me about this idea you had, and you wanted to have Zildjian be part of it, and it involved a commitment of product for the campers. And
And you came, you know what? I'm gonna tell you, you came through. DW came through for me. And there was a guy, I'm thinking at Korg, there's a guy at Korg who was a late guy. He passed away. But he gave me Korg. I needed help.
yeah,
The
sure,
camp,
yeah,
unfortunately, it's a great place for someone to go through a life-changing experience, and it's amazing. I mean, I know I talk about it, and you have to, and people have gone through it, rock stars
yeah,
like, but it's not a business where you have a concert and you just keep increasing the more tickets you can sell, bigger venues. I got 12 bands, I got 12 drummers, I got 12 bass players, so there's like a limit that you can do. But I have to tell you, from a point of giving back, it is the most incredible fun thing I've ever done. um,
I'll bet.
and I think what I love most about it is that every day I come up with a new idea. And for a guy like me who has so much, that's why I loved Ringo and the All-Starr band. When I did that band, I would come up with, I challenge myself. I really challenge myself,
Yeah,
come up with a new band every year and find new musicians and just to keep it fresh. And I love that part about it. And putting those
yeah.
bands together for Ringo was really a lot of fun for me.
Well, it's obvious that you are one of these guys that, you know, it's always going on up there. You're always thinking of something, and yeah,
And,
you,
and,
you
and
can
you
you
know,
can.
I got to tell you, we did 160 master classes during COVID. And the great Steve Gadd, I know he had never done a camp and he didn't do Ringo's tour, but I got him to do a master class, and he did.
Yeah,
What an honor to be around him, and just and an honor because everyone just looks up to him, and
yeah,
in drumming. And I learned one thing, and there were two denominators to what I learned from 160 artists during COVID, doing master classes. It's the passion and the song. It's about two things. Whether it was
yeah,
Alice Cooper, whether it was a producer, whether it was a drummer, passion is what we have in our business, and the key to success is the song. And
yeah.
so and I don't want to ever lose my passion, because when I lose my passion, I lost my passion to be a sports agent and I was doing, once my players retired, and I didn't want to go back into that, keep finding, and and now the greatest thing is that I am the biggest Red Sox, Celtic, Bruin, Patriot fan, and I know you live up
Oh
in that
wow,
area. Oh, crazy!
yeah.
You know
I would
that.
have never guessed that.
Okay, so your fantasy might be, I don't know, Ringo Starr. Mine was having Wick Grosbeck, the owner of the Boston Celtics, at Rock Camp.
Yes, and I was there that day. I
Yeah,
was there one of those days with Joey Kramer
Joey
because
Kramer.
you were. I know you were in touch with Joey, and Joey and I were really close because we lived in the neighboring towns,
Right.
here in the South Shore of Boston and Zildjian. So he said, come to the rock and roll. I want to check this thing out. I know you were trying to get him there. So,
Yeah.
and there was Wick who came over, and I knew who he was, and he came right over to Joey and introduced himself, and I'm like, that's the owner of the Celtics
Owner
right
of the
there. Holy
Celtics.
shit.
So to
Holy
me,
shit.
that was amazing to get him. And then Coach Belichick, I used to send him a guitar once a year from one of my camps, because Bill and I were friends when he was the coach of the Giants, and I represented a lot of the
Of
offensive line
course.
with Bill Sims.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would send Bill, at the Patriots all the time, and then I remember writing him a note because my son said to me, "Dad, can we go to Boston and go see some Red Sox games?" And I said, "Not only going to see Red Sox games, I want to take you to meet Wick Grosbeck of the Celtics. I'm going to take you to meet Coach Belichick." And and Bill sent a couple of his friends to camp, and so I'm a huge Boston fan, and I couldn't
Wow.
decide whether to wear my Bruins shirt today, my Patriots shirt, my Celtics shirt, or wear my Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp shirt. So I wore the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp shirt.
You made the right choice as usual, my friend. The right choice as usual. I want to just read a couple of quick comments and questions and before they fade away. And also, let's remember, before we forget, I made a note. We want to give a shout out to our friend Billy Amendola.
Have to shout out
He's
to
watching.
Billy,
Yep.
because Billy, from early days of me starting Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, he loved what I did in creating it. He got me so many great drummers to come to camp, including the great Ginger Baker. And he is Mr. Drummer, loves drummers, and
Yeah.
he really helped me a lot in making camp happen.
I agree. I've known Billy, gosh, close
Heart
to
of gold.
40 years.
Heart of gold.
Heart of gold. And I'll say also, he's a heck of a fine drummer himself too.
Yeah.
I got put in the hot seat at the NAMM show a few years ago at the DW booth. They were doing this jam session, and Billy's playing on one kit, and Denny Sywell from Wings, Denny. And there's and they're trying to get me to play, and I'm left-handed like you. I can't play a right-handed kit, so they put me on percussion.
Yeah, you guys are a pain in the ass, because I had the crew guy always move the drum set around for the final show.
Yeah, I know. It's a curse, but I would have loved to have played with Billy. I would have loved to have sat down, because he plays a beautiful groove, but I ended up playing percussion and just kind of staying out of trouble that way. But he's a heck of a fine drummer and a great guy. So.
And I made a list here. You wouldn't believe it, but I went through the top 100 drummers, and I made a list of all these amazing drummers and stories that I have about their appearance at camp. So we have to talk about that too.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I want to, David, Anthony Cucina is asking, David, how are you promoting these days that are so different from yesteryears?
Well, the good thing about Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp is I'm really in the cocaine business, because once you taste my brand, you got to keep coming back. So while people are scared to come to play with Roger Daltrey and Jeff Beck, late Jeff Beck, once you come to Rock Camp and you get that off your, you come, then you keep coming. So we're very fortunate that 50% of our campers are returnees. And so the first 50% sell out right away. And then the next 50% want to come back, and they eventually do, because most people do multiple camps. But, the movie has just been really taking off and spiraling and opening up the floodgates. And I'm proud to say we have a series Fox TV is developing now. I'm going to be on the Rock Camp also, and
great.
But the best way is through podcasts and Modern Drummer has been a great help. Modern Drummer, by the way, I have to say that Billy and the original owners, they were really helpful in giving me advertising, and I would promote them. So it was a great partnership.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great shout out, and I'm going to just make read you a comment from a friend of mine who's watching, a great drummer who is on. And by the way, thank you for doing this today, David. Thank you for being.
I couldn't wait
podcast.
to do it. I couldn't wait to do it. Because drummers are I started off, that was my first thing I knew of a musician, was a drummer.
Yeah, this is perfect. And you're the first non-drummer I've ever had on this, but you're better than any other guest I've had. So no. I'm kidding, anybody watching. But my friend Eddie Taduri, a fine drummer who was on about a month ago with me, is just this comment, what an amazing guy. I can't believe I don't know him personally. Great stories. And I'd like to connect you guys afterward.
Please.
Via email. Eddie does he lives out in Santa Barbara area, so he's Southern California as well, and has an organization called TRAPS, and it's a teaching kids with disabilities and
great.
Yeah. I think you guys should definitely.
I've seen over the years, kids have come to camp, or adults, and a lot of drummers have ADD like me. That's why they can keep going. My son Josh, he taps all day. And one of the greatest things that have happened to me at camp was Joe Perry coming to Rock Camp, and he's been to 4 of them already, and he'll do another one. He's been a great advocate of Rock Camp for me, because it really changed his life too. He came out and he wrote me a beautiful letter after his appearance at Foxwoods. But I'll never forget, we do a Q&A at camp, and what's great about the Q&As, you really get to, not only do you get to jam with these rockers, but you get to really talk to them and ask them their influences and their gear. They love talking about gear. And so Joe Perry asked the guy a question. He says, "Hey, gentlemen, sir, stand up. What do you do for a living?" The guy says, he says, "I'm a guitar player." And no, I'm sorry. He said, "I'm a lawyer. And on weekends, I play guitar in my band." And Joe Perry turns to the guy and says, "You're full of shit." He says, "You're a guitarist first, and you did that legal bullshit to buy your guitars."
Oh,
And it was a minute later, I
yeah.
called my brother up and I said, "Joey, you hear this line Joe Perry said?" And he said, "David, I would do anything to be a full-time drummer." He says, "Drumming is my life." And, yesterday he calls me, he says, "I had a 2-hour discussion with your son." He called me and all we did was talk drumming. Drummers talk drum, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
and technicians. And that's why your
Yeah.
buddy Greg Bissonette is just such an amazing guy too. He's a drummer.
He is. He is a drummer's drummer, and then his personality and everything else that comes with it.
Oh, he's such a giving guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I love
What
about drummers. I have to say,
yeah.
unlike the guitar players, unlike the lead singers, bass players and drummers, they're just more modest and, they're just, they're cool.
Yeah, I agree. Salt of the earth, and you mentioned Steve Gadd is a very good friend, and when we used to travel together on these tours we did for Zildjian, and in those days, I was kind of entrenched in the sort of corporate side of it, and I'd say to Steve, "Well, yeah, I don't really play anymore," and he said very much what you're saying, what Joe Perry said, which is like, you're always going to be a drummer. You're always a drummer. This is something else you're doing, but. And sure enough, he was, when I left and came back to playing drums again, he was like, in my corner all the time, like pushing me and telling me to practice more and try this and try that. And so, it's a real fraternity.
Great release too. It's a great release. It's great exercise. And so, it's amazing.
Great. I'm going to read you a comment that, Philippe Ramos has posted up on the Facebook page, and I know Philippe is watching. He commented earlier, and it's just to tell you that, well, first he said, "I've enjoyed your podcast the past year, John. You're probably the best looking guy I've ever," no, he didn't say all that. He's saying, "Hi, David. I was at the Brad Whitford camp in 2014. Hopefully get to do another one this year. I was on a couple of master classes during the pandemic. Amazing." So just a satisfied customer.
Well, thank you. And I, by the way, Philippe, I have that same T-shirt with just different type. I get more calls about that shit. More people stop me off. Yeah.
Cool yeah. My daughter gave me this a couple of years ago, and it's we can relate to this. Right? They know, it's exactly. So the fantasy camp started off in 1997, and you probably had to kind of start slow and build. I'm guessing the first couple of years.
I started we did in Florida. I did my first camp in Florida. And I had 14 campers and I had 50 people from the press. And it was a financial disaster. I had Liberty DeVito, and Liberty was the camp. I forgot a couple other drummers, but I'll think about it. But, it was an idea I had, and the media was great. The 50 media people signed, asked if they could come. And I'll never forget, the second day I'm walking through the lobby, and I put on the camp because, I never cancel. I never believe in canceling. And so I did the camp, and all of a sudden this guy, Bob Spitz, is a famous writer. He wrote the Led Zeppelin book. And he comes over to me and he yells at me, he says, "Fishof, come here." And they're all sitting around the lobby. And they said, the guy from People Magazine, MTV, they were all there. The media show, we Newsweek, Time. And they said, "We were going to roast you." He said, "But this thing is quite cool, we are roasting a lot." And these artists like, Nils Lofgren, he now teaches guitar on his website. He says, "I learned at Rock and Roll Fans Camp." These artists, for the first time, they learned to give back. And I tell you what makes the camp, in the past, rockers always went, they ran out of the venue. I mean, with Ringo, we never stayed. When I hear "Little Help My Friends," I knew to run to the van. We were going to leave. And they're always running away. And now here's an opportunity for you to sit down with these rock stars and really get their knowledge and their groove and how to do it. And I have to say that the knowledge that all these people get from the drummers, and 4 days with Vinny Appice, I mean, he can teach you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for a drummer, camp is fabulous. You really get a lot out of it.
You can see that, and I really encourage people to watch the documentary, watch the Rock Camp doc, because it's you really get that, and we know from being around these guys too how This isn't something we're making up. I mean, I've seen that with musicians, how much it impacts them to give something back, how
Yeah.
great it makes them feel to know that it was some person's dream to come to this camp and play in a band with them, and to, you had I forget his name, I'm sorry, but he got to join Judas Priest on stage at I think it was Judas Priest at the Whiskey.
No, whiskey, sure. Hold on,
Yeah.
wait a minute. I had a drummer. I got two stories I want to share. We had one drummer from New Jersey who came to camp, met Roger Daltrey. He told Roger, Roger has a charity called Teenage Cancer America.
Yes.
To
Yep.
Roger, if I can play on drums one song with you and Pete, I'll give you $250,000 to your charity. How cool is that?
That's oh, I love it.
Yeah,
And
Roger
so,
did that.
oh
Yeah,
man,
so that's but it's been incredible to see them come and give. And my next camp, I got Carmine coming, talking, he's gonna do about with Zeppelin. It's a Zeppelin based camp. Um,
great, great,
so what's
great.
the
Yeah.
next camp out? Oh, I got incredible from Poison, Ricky Rocket. He's coming to the camp after that, and he's gonna jam with. It'll be his first camp, but he's gonna jam with all the campers at the Whiskey A Go Go on the final night. And
Great.
so yeah, it's
And,
exciting.
and the next one I think I saw on your website, is it May in
No,
Florida?
next one is March
Oh,
6,
this is March.
yeah, 16, 17, 18, 19. And it's Zeppelin focused. And but Kim Thale from Soundgarden. And here's a guy. He came to
Yeah,
camp,
man.
and I always say come for a few 3 hours, just jam with these people. They always land up doing the Q&A. They always land up staying longer because they have nowhere to go, and and
Right.
uh and Kim Thale, he partied with everybody. He went back to the rooms. He had such a great time. So he's coming back this time, and here's the guitar player from Soundgarden. You're going to jam with him at Live at the Whiskey. I mean, this is an opportunity of a lifetime that you get to play with them and get their knowledge. But one great drummer we have to talk about that was Nick Mason. Now, Nick Mason from Pink Floyd. So I have a camper. Do we have a time limit here?
No, we're good. We got time. Yeah,
Okay,
we're
I'm
good.
going to share this.
Yeah.
I got nowhere to go. So
Me either.
okay, good. So here's an amazing story. I'm putting Ringo's All-Star Band together, and I did a special event. I went to a place called the Hoffman Institute, and I just came back this weekend from doing it again. And you can look it up. It's a life-changing experience to people, and they play the song "The Living Years" there, and
Yeah.
I love the song. And I remember going to check out Paul Carrick, because I'm going to
Hmm.
use him for the All-Star Band. The fun part of the All-Star Band was I used to fly all around to meet these different musicians to try to appeal to them to do this. And many times I didn't have to because it was Ringo, but I wanted to get to Paul Carrick and see him and meet him, and then explain him what the band is and so I go out to meet him. And I remember coming back to Ringo's house the next day. Oh, who we have in the band this year? And we disagreed about Paul Carrick, and I said, well, Ringo, I want to hear that song every night. The Living. But it
I
was so
love it.
meaningful to me, and I had a beautiful
Yeah.
relationship with my father. And the song is about people who don't have a relationship with their father. And he finally agreed. And Paul was a star that year. I don't know if you ever saw that edition, but
I sure did.
he had
I sure did. Paul
three hits:
Carrick.
Tempted, and
How long?
How
How long
Long,
by
and Living
Ace?
Years. I mean, he blew it away.
Yeah. I was just
So,
gonna say he was in 3 different bands with 3 major hits. Yeah, I
right. So
know.
now I'm doing a camp in London, and I'm doing a camp at the Royal at you got the jam at Abbey Road, and by the way, I got Pete Best. The campers got to go to jam at the Cavern
Wow.
with Pete Best, and that was incredible for me to meet him. Also, what a sweet guy.
Yeah.
And what happened was that I meet this lady at camp, and she comes, and she's a bass player, and she's telling me that her father is good friends with Nick Mason, but she doesn't talk to her father. Her father collects cars. They're best friends. So I said, you should talk to your father. Whatever it is, before he dies, you want to get to know your father, and I think it's really important. So so that night, I go back to my hotel room, and I call Paul Carrick. And I said, Paul, do me a favor. Could you come and surprise the campers at camp? And I love to do this. By the way, I've had Micky Dolenz come to camp, and and just as a surprise, sitting next to people. And ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Micky Dolenz, the Monkees. Ah, and I like to surprise people. So Paul Carrick comes and he does the Q&A. And then I said, do me a favor, can you just do that song, The Living Years? I want this lady to hear how important it is for her to connect with her father. And he does it. And she cries and she bawls, and that was that. And she gets back together with her father. And then her father calls Nick Mason one day and says, my daughter went to this rock and roll fantasy camp, and somehow she called me and tied up. And I didn't even know this, and all of a sudden I reached out to Nick Mason, reaches out to me and asked me about rock and roll fantasy camp. And I told him what it is. And I asked him if he would do it. And I'm doing it in LA. He came, he did it. And not only did he come and do it, he stayed for 4 days. And he said, this is incredible. He says, I get to play with Micky Dolenz. I want to play a Monkees song. He got to play other songs other than Pink Floyd, because they're always
that's great.
Songs. And he was having so much fun. And then afterwards, he says to me, he writes me an email, says, do you mind if I write a story about this in GQ, England? And he wrote a whole article about his experience at Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. And, Nick Mason doesn't need my money. Nick Mason is probably one of the wealthiest guys in our business.
Yeah.
He's very smart with his money. And just to get a guy's heart like that, one of the greatest drummers in the world. And
absolutely.
That to me is what rock camp's about.
Yeah. I love hearing these stories, man, because I mean, what you've done is you've tapped into this like human part of the whole
humanize them.
Yeah, it really is. It's like, and we keep talking about the documentary, and I just made a couple of quick notes of friends of mine I know that have done it. You mentioned Steve Gadd and Vinny Appice.
Oh, Vinny's amazing. And I love his line. I want to get my drumsticks. His favorite line in camp is, hey, don't play with the tips. Play with the big things. He gets very sexual with it. He's
But you've had Joe Vitale.
Okay, let's talk about Joe Vitale. Hold on, we got to go.
Sandy,
Joe. Go slowly. I'll give you a story about them all. So Joe Vitale, what makes him so special is that he's also a songwriter, and I've had him come in and do songwriting camps, and bringing emotions out of people that he motivated me. I did a Desmond Child songwriting camp, and I had Joe come down, and so not only is he an incredible drummer, but he's an amazing songwriter and plays the keyboards, and he's had an effect on a lot of my campers. So Joe Vitale, amazing.
Top. Yeah, I love that guy, man.
He's more in the list. We talked about Ginger Baker.
We'll talk about Ginger. I know Sandy Gennaro has done a few of these, probably, right? Liberty, you mentioned Liberty DeVito.
Love Liberty. And Liberty, so Liberty meets his wife at Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. Anna was my assistant.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, Anna ran my office, and she always said to me, I want to marry a rock star. And, she had a little crush on Zach, Zach Starkey, and I don't blame her. He's a handsome guy, but he was married. So she got the next best drummer. She got Liberty DeVito. Liberty came and met Anna at camp. And
that's fantastic. I bet I spoke with her on the phone a time or two.
You
back
asked
in
her.
the day.
You asked her.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. And so Ginger Baker, this is great. I love the whole Ginger,
Well, let's talk about Ginger. It was his last appearance.
Yeah.
That he made. It was Billy who introduced me to his daughter, and I convinced Ginger to come, and he flew in from England. And I remember picking him up at the airport, and I turned to him and I said, Mr. Baker, thank you so much. I was scared. I saw that documentary too. I mean, I thought he'd throw a drumstick at me while I was driving. I had those fears. And I remember him sitting in the front of a car. I wanted to pick him up personally. And I said, I have to tell you that, growing up, I heard 2 words in my house, God and Ginger Baker. And he said, he looks at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, my father was a rabbi, so he told me God, God, God. And I said, my brother was a drummer, and all he did talk about was Ginger Baker. And he came to camp, and he was really in a lot of pain from cancer, but he said, David, I'm here for you. And he had back issues because of the cancer, but I remember they put it. You guys got an amazing drum set together for him, and DW put and he came, and what an honor to have him. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
And then Billy did a Q&A with him, and then so many drummers showed up. I mean, that was the amazing thing. And you see that picture in the film.
Yeah.
They all stick the middle finger because I was Ginger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think when we were off the air, you were saying, and I just echoing what you said, which was, he was really a sweet guy,
oh,
underneath anything that people might think
you
about
do
him.
rock
Really is.
camp, you're a
Yeah.
sweet guy because you're giving.
Yeah.
And I have to say that. And then the other funny story I love with him was I was on tour with Ringo when we were at Red Rocks, and the band was Jack Bruce, Peter Frampton, and Simon Kirk was in that band. Oh, we got to talk about Simon because
Yes,
someone.
sure. Simon Kirk. Yes.
So, so I remember Ginger Baker comes on and Ringo had him come on at the end, do the last song, and he gets up there and says, let me introduce Ginger Baker, and tonight we have 2% cream. And
Yeah, that's
he was a
great.
fireman then, he was a fireman.
I did not know that.
Yes, Ginger was a fireman. That's why he moved in Denver. He was a fireman.
Oh my gosh. Well, I remember
Learning
because,
from me about these drummers.
well, his wife at the time I know had horses. They both had horses out there. Karen, I got to know her, but yeah, I just thought they'd kind of at a point, got out of England because of the taxes and retired,
He
to.
became a fireman. And then I had a son at a camp. His son came and met
Oh, Kofi. Yeah.
Kofi. He was great. He was also a sweet
Great
guy.
drummer. Yeah. 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 What an amazing, history and no sign. I mean, it keeps growing. It keeps going and
Keep
growing.
growing. I keep getting more drummers. I keep getting, I think, here's another great one. Nico McBrain.
Yeah. Yep.
So, so he comes to camp, and first of all, he's got that great rib joint in Florida. So the first
Yes.
thing I do is I'm going to feed him all Nico's ribs. And so I feed him Nico's ribs, and he just loved camp so much. He stayed for 3 days. He was hanging around, kept coming back, kept coming back. And here's what I love. I wrote to him an email last week, and I said, Nico, when are you going to be available? When you'll be off tour? He gives me the date. I am back. I want to do it. And he kept emailing me for 2 weeks after camp. How was it? How did they do? And I just loved his interest. Roger Dalton
That's
was
great.
that way too. He'd always write
Yeah.
me after camps. How the people liking it? And I think they love that I give other musicians jobs. And they love the people that, today everybody's straight, and
Yeah.
I think that. But Nico, another great one. Kellner came to camp. He was brilliant. And then we have to talk about Levon Helm, because
Yes. Oh man.
I wrote my second book. I remember dedicating it to Levon Helm and Davy Jones. Okay, now two guys who are so far apart from each other, and I didn't know who Levon was. I got to be honest with you. I wasn't I didn't really know much about the band. Ringo introduced me. It was his idea to get Rick Danko and for that first band. That
Yeah. Yeah.
Levon was so special, and I learned from him so much about the business. And by the way, he was, he's different than everybody.
Yeah.
What motivated him, he didn't show up to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was really angry, but I called him to come to Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, and I'll be there for you, David. He was there. And I have to share the story because when I was starting to get camp together, I went to England to see Roger Daltrey, the great Ron Delsto, the promoter, and everyone kept saying, David, you have a great idea, but you got to get the stars. It's fantasy.
Yeah.
So I fly to England to meet Roger Daltrey, who I'd met through Zach. Zach introduced me to him years before because I loved, when I saw Zach Starkey drum, I was blown away too.
Yeah.
He did his father's All-Starr band before he came on as a guest to the Greek, the first.
Yeah.
And I saw that kid drum, and I said, wow, that kid, he's got so much talent. So then I went to his father and I said, you got to put him in the band. My son, yeah, okay, let's put him. And then I came up with the idea from Zach to create the British Rock Symphony. It was the music of the Beatles, the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and The Who as a symphonic record. And, you should listen to it. It's on all Amazon. It's on music.
Yeah. I'll check it out.
It is an album no one ever heard. You hear it at the ball games, but it's a powerful symphonic record. and I wanted to put an orchestra behind Zach. That's really was my vision. And I did this project, and Zach introduced me afterwards to Roger Daltrey. He said, you should meet him, and so I got friendly with Roger. I fly over to England, and I called him up because I wanted to do rock and roll fantasy camp. So he said, "Oh, come over for dinner." We go over there, and only me. I'll fly. Get a meeting with Roger. I'm going there. So
Yeah,
Ringo
sure.
Starr. That's how I signed Ringo. I got a meeting with him, and I went over to England and pitched him my idea.
Yeah.
So I go to meet Roger, and the whole night I'm talking, Roger, can you do my camp? And I said, this is why it's a great camp. And the whole night he's going back and forth with me, camp. Oh, you should do a camp, do a camp. Finally, I didn't know what he was talking about. I didn't understand his language, and he had that British deep little voice. And finally he says to me, yeah, you should. I said, Roger, I came here. I want you to do my camp. Oh, you don't need me. You should do the Thompsons, the Village People. And I said, what are you talking about? The word camp in England is campy.
Oh no.
He didn't understand what I was talking about. I'm a Jewish
Yeah.
go to camp in the Catskills, so we all went to summer camp in the Berkshires where you are. Oh, you do a camp.
Yeah.
And I said, no. Let me explain to you what it is. If you have your dream that you could play with one musician or meet one musician, you, Roger Daltrey, who would you like to meet? He says, you introduced me to the band, to Levon Helm. If I can meet Levon Helm, I'll do your camp.
Wow.
And I met Levon on the Ringo tour, and I started representing the band afterwards, and we got friendly. And so I knew I had that in the bag. I said, I'll call Ringo. Let me ask him.
You said it's going to be tough, but I'm going to make
really
it happen.
Things like that. I come back, I tell Levon, would you like to meet Roger Daltrey? And it'd be great. I'll be there, David, for you. I'll be there. He was so much there for me, Levon.
Yeah.
And I was there, and I loved my friendship with him. When he got hoarse at the end, I know he loved the Yankees. I remember taking him to a Yankee game. I used to go sit up with him in Woodstock on his property and just talk. He had such a heart, and while I didn't, he would turn me down on hundreds of thousands of dollars on deals, and but if you asked him to play, 5 minutes away or get on a bus, and his whole business acumen was so different. He had his own philosophies, but people who he loved and were close, and I have dreams about him. It's crazy. That's how much he meant to me in my life, and just really one of the. And I'm the one who said, you got to write a book, and I wanted to write that book with Stephen Davis, and he's just very, very, very special. And I remember being at the last Grateful Dead show with him, and may he rest in peace, because he also was another influence of so many drummers who sing.
Oh, I know, man. Wow. And I'll just say, I spoke with him on the phone a number of times, only met him in person one time right before we lost him, and in Boston. He was on tour with his daughter, and they were playing with the Black Crowes. I think they were supporting the Black Crowes. And Steve Gorman, who's a friend of mine, the drummer for the Black Crowes, said, something like, have you seen Levon? I said, I'd spoken with his manager, and she said, with his throat being what it was, he's under orders not to talk and rest. So I said, I probably shouldn't bother him. He's like, bullshit. You're going to go meet Levon Helm. And he gave me the most warm embrace. No. And he said, he looked me right in the eye, said, with that voice of his, that kind of drawl, he said, thank you very much for everything, all the support all these years, and come up to you got to come up to a ramble some night. You got to come up for a ramble sometime.
That was his mind. He always told me, I want to do this rambles. He always said, I'm going to do it. He showed me the way. I'd go visit him a lot at the house, and he would love the acoustics up there. And
I wish I never made it, but I treasure that moment.
I've been to the house. I never made a rambles. I missed it.
Yeah. But thank you for sharing these stories about him, because I think not enough people talk about him. What an incredible drummer he was! What an incredible singer!
The feel, and then, but a voice. What a voice!
The voice.
Oh
my God!
Remember, I would say to him, Levon, you got to do the song. What his favorite?
The Weight.
The down Dixie. What was the song that he sang?
Up on Cripple
Oh,
Creek.
Couple People
Yeah.
did. The nothing.
Then they drove old Dixie down.
Right.
Yeah.
So I said to him,
Yes.
why don't you do that song? And he said, well, she recorded it, and people don't know it's me. And listen, he was definitely had his thoughts, his opinions,
Yeah.
and you couldn't change him on certain things. But he was right on a lot of things too. And I even Joe Walsh, the two of them, I learned so much. I mean, Joe Walsh, I got him a record deal, and it's a 5-year deal. And he says to me, now, you want me to sign a 5-year deal, but the guy who's going to sign me is going to be fired after a year. And these guys,
He
they
yeah.
understood the business different than most people.
He wasn't wrong. Exactly. Yeah. He'd been around the block enough to know that
Yeah,
so much of it is bullshit, that
right. They knew the bullshit. They
yeah.
saw through the bullshit. They
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
through the bullshit. Levon saw through the bullshit.
And you of course knew him way, way better than I did. He just always seemed to me just what you're saying, like he had such great principles
Principles,
and just
yes. I mean,
yeah.
I
And
don't care what Robbie Robertson says in his last film he did. Robbie screwed those guys, and
yeah,
maybe he was smarter and everything like that. Rick Danko died poor, and
it's awful,
Rich
man.
Emanuel, but I think from Roger Daltrey I learned why they were a band's band. How much musicians admired them, and so
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. And I just want to, someone had put a comment up here just asking, and I think has Max Weinberg
oh let,
done any camps with you?
let me tell you about Max Weinberg. So
Yeah.
you all
Okay.
these drummers. So Max Weinberg, first of all, we're really good friends, and at the first Ringo tour, he hosted a dinner at his house for Ringo on his day off. He loves Ringo.
Yeah.
By the way, I met so many drummers because the only ones that come backstage are drummers. They
Right.
everybody would just want to meet Ringo. They just want to meet him, touch him,
Yeah.
get a picture with him, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel bad because that's all people want to do. They want a picture with him, and every drummer wants to meet him, and he's so giving to them, and so giving to these musicians, Ringo, and even with the 12 steps that he's done, and his rocker meeting in his house, so many of them have attended, and I can't tell you how many rockers, before we do the tour, we'd have to insure all these rockers, and because they always bought insurance, and so many of them, from Dave Edmunds, learned that he had a heart ailment, and Ringo helped a lot of these people quietly. He doesn't take credit, but put a lot
Yeah.
of them in
Yep.
programs, and so what was the question about? What was the question?
Just Max Weinberg being
Max.
involved in the.
I meet Max at Ringo's, and he hosts this party for Ringo at his house. Bruce Springsteen showed up. He hosted a dinner in Ringo's honor, and Max Weinberg, I asked him to come to camp, came to camp, and then said, "I don't want your check. Give it to Roger Daltrey's charity." He says, "I love
Uh,
what you do," and I mean, there's a special guy, and
that's beautiful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Max is great at camp, and God bless him, he's touring with Springsteen, and then he was busy with a TV show, but a really great favorite of mine. But he
Yeah.
donated back his money. He said, "I don't want the money. Just give it to
That's
charity."
That's beautiful,
Yeah,
man. That's yep, and it doesn't surprise me at all. And then he kind of got the idea from what you do to some degree. He does that jukebox,
yeah.
Max Wine, which is a great sort of concept rolled off that,
Hey, Gene
with
Simmons loves
playing.
to do what I do. Anytime I come up with
Yeah,
an idea, Gene's there to copy. He does his own meet and greets now with playing bass, and that's great. You know what? I'll tell you something. To me, the one thing I did learn from Ringo was about, and going back to the film, was I didn't want to be in the film. I wanted the film to be the campers and the rockers, and then they said, you have to be in this film. But I really was looking to promote everybody. That was Ringo. He taught me when I go to him for an interview. They want to talk to you. He said, "Oh, give it to this guy, give it to that guy." He just wants to be in a band. That's the beautiful thing about him, that he doesn't want to be the leader. I mean, he wants to be the band leader, but he just wants to be in a band. It's important
exactly.
being in a band. I'm not an individual. It's a team. And I love when
Yeah,
people come out, and even recently, we were talking about how the success of the Beatles was, if John, okay, the drummer of the Who, okay,
oh, Keith Moon,
Keith,
the original.
Keith Moon was in the Beatles, they wouldn't have been as successful as they are with Ringo.
No.
I don't care what people say, but here's a guy who Ringo fits so perfectly in the Beatles with the groove and how many songs that he gave. People don't realize, but so many songs got the introductions and the songs in the middle from his grooves, and he and to his credit, McCartney and Lennon, they share royalties with him and Harrison on their
Yep.
songwriting because they really believe that Ringo, added a lot to the catalog. So
Absolutely. Yeah. You and I, we're going to do a future podcast just talking about Ringo and just how great, I
how
mean,
you got
in
to do with
the
drummers, so they really understand that. But my
yeah,
15 years with him was a blessing, and it really opened the door for me to meet a lot of these incredible, talents. Let's talk about Tommy Lee.
Tommy Lee. Yes.
Tommy
Yeah.
Lee.
Got
Tommy
to talk.
Lee, the one I got to tell you about his experience. He came to camp, and he came to camp. I did a camp in the Bahamas, and I thought what was cool about Tommy Lee because he falls right under fantasy. I did everything, whatever it took. I wanted.
Sure. Yeah.
He accepted to come to camp, and I got nervous. He took 3 planes to get there because his flight is coming from Portland and he got to the Bahamas. But he came on time, and he just drummed with everyone. And I thought was really cool is these 6 women signed up to Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp for yeah, there he is. 6 women signed up to Rock Camp because of Tommy Lee, and this one lady brought these 5 ladies. They had created a band, and I remember a lady, she even paid him for a private lesson, and he shows up to camp, and I, after he left the room, Kip Winger was the counselor. I went into the ladies' room and I said, "Ladies, this is a fantasy camp. You got to go home to your husbands." They were having so much fun. They were having so much fun between Kip Winger and Tommy Lee, but he was great. He showed up.
Yeah.
Well, I would do anything to have him back. And I know he's busy with Motley Crue, but he was a tremendous, tremendous guest at camp. And then I know Billy introduced me to Kathy Rich, whose husband
Yes.
Greg Potter. He's a hell of a drummer, and they come together as a team, and
Yep.
they're super people, and they keep that Buddy Rich band, going.
Yeah, I thought that was a great, seeing them in the documentary, and I know Kathy and Greg, and I thought that was a really smart idea to have them involved too, because it brings like another element to it, and
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, yeah,
Kathy sings, and just to see, Greg's boy, he's some drummer. He's
yeah, he's a great drummer,
he's got great drummers. I mean,
great drummer, yeah,
I mean, she
and a
married.
funny guy. I'm sure you, my
Funny.
God, he could be a
I mean,
stand-up
most
comic.
drummers are funny.
Yeah, yeah, I
They
had
don't
them
take
on about a
themselves
year
too
ago.
serious, right?
No, we can't. Yeah, we can't.
Yeah.
Oh, too funny.
Well, we got to get some new ones. I got to get Trey Cool. I don't care what it takes. My son loves him. There's
He'd
a
be
whole
great.
next generation of people. I think they would be. I think if these drummers would really see the movie and really see what it's about, or ask people, I think they would really enjoy that next generation of drummers from, the Trey Cools of the world, and
Yeah.
Cameron from Pearl Jam. He'd be a great one. And so if they're listening,
Great drummer. Is your son a Deftones fan by any chance? Does he like the Deftones?
yes, he does. Yes.
Okay. Abe Cunningham is a buddy of mine, and he's going to be on probably in a couple of weeks. He's going to be on my
Great.
podcast. I'll put in a word. Seriously, I'd be happy to.
Anytime. We really could use some,
Yeah.
new drummers, new bands, even from the Black Crowes, because they would have been great. I know I didn't go after the drummer. I went after, because if I'm doing Zeppelin music, I'm doing 80s, I just love to introduce, again, I have a lucky job because I get to wake up every morning and try to come up with a new idea of creating a camp. And so I love to meet new musicians, and I'm hoping the ones that listen and the camp and the people come, they'll go through the experience of camp.
It's great, man. It's great what you're doing, David. It's great that I say this the right way, that that you're very fortunate, that you work your butt off, obviously, and you have to get to where you are. But it's so great to see you enjoying all the benefits that have come with it, and that's the most important thing. You're enjoying your life, and
Listen, every day you get a letter, you get an email, you get a Facebook post. Thank you for changing my life. These women, they
yeah,
send their husbands, and these guys come and these women come, and they, inevitably a woman says, my husband doesn't have road rage anymore. He's doing what he enjoys. He's recording. He's joining a band. So many of our campers have gone. So many campers have never played in a band before. Can you imagine that?
yeah, sure, yeah,
Band together. They take lessons in their house, but to put a band together is hard, and I'll never forget, some guy comes, he's a drummer, and I'll leave you with this story. And then he comes to camp. He owns a shoe company. His family sends him to camp and comes to camp, and then he meets people at camp, and they form a band in New York City. The daughter calls me up and she says, my father's having his first gig, and
uh,
would you come as a guest and surprise him? So I show up to camp. Now, let me show up to the gig. Now, this guy, not only did he have two bass drummers, two basses, he had a setup like Neil Peart. Okay,
yeah,
you got the money. He had Neil
yeah,
Peart setup, right? The guitar player from camp had amps stacked to the roof, and he had 40 guitars. They had all this gear, and
that's great.
and then I said to the guy, what he did was he came back. He shows up to SIR in New York, and he walks into a room and he says to the guy, he says, I want to rent the room here one night a week, and we're gonna have band practice. The guy turns to him and says, you ever been in a band before? And he says, yeah. Look at this photo. It's me and Roger Daltrey. We jammed at the House of Blues last week. The guy said, okay.
You gave him cred. He's got cred now.
Got cred, and I think
Man.
I think that's been the fun part, that these people have taken what they've learned at camp, and they join Eagles tribute bands. They join they join all these kind of bands, and they form bands, and they love music, and they find their passion, what they really want, because the bottom line is they're musicians.
Yeah. No, it's life-changing stuff, and it's great. It's great. David, thank you so much. This has been what a great time we spent here today, and I thank you so much for being here and sharing these stories.
Thank you. I'm so glad we connected. Thank you for your support. I wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for you.
Wow.
You helped me with those things, because help me with the gear.
Thank you.
Billy, modern drummer, and of course to all these drummers, whether it's Steve Adler, Mickey Hart. I got so many names here who've come to camp and love their support, and really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for the kind words, and it's a pleasure being your friend all these years, and we'll continue.
If I come to Boston, are we going to go to a Red Sox game?
Yeah, we'll go. Come on. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll surprise you. I'm coming.
Okay. I am there with you. That's great. All right, everybody, big hand for David Fishof. Thank you so much for watching today. David, thanks again.
Go to the website, rockcamp.com is the information. David or Rockcamp's my email. Feel free, you can email me any questions or anything.
Great. Okay, and definitely check out the documentary on Amazon Prime, Rock Camp. It's fantastic.